Raise enough to understand how to pull yourself through, what's affectionately known as pilot hell. It's with any large B2B enterprise and pharma in particular, you can end up in reoccurring pilots. And while that looks good because you're making a little bit of money, you're not actually pulling them through to a license and really validating your business. And that sometimes takes a little bit more runway than you think it is. And those pilots are not as revenue generating. So that can really get you. And you'd be going back to the market without any real metrics other than, I have another pilot re-signed for another 6 months.
Hey there, Powderkeg fans. Nick here from the Powderkeg team, and this is episode 123 of Powderkeg Igniting Startups, the show for entrepreneurs, leaders, and innovators building remarkable tech companies in areas outside of Silicon Valley. And today, we're going to be looking at an interview that I had the chance to do at last year's UNMET conference in Denver, Colorado. There, I had the awesome opportunity to speak with Jason Smith, co-founder and CEO of rMark Bio, a personalized business intelligence solution that empowers life science companies to identify and partner with clinical and academic scientists. And Jason is a leading edge technologist and product executive with over 19 years of industry experience. He has held positions in early stage companies, large multinational organizations, and venture capital incubators, building a rich professional background. And through this wide range of experience leading product teams, he's helped create many innovative products, especially what he's working on right now with rMark. And using sound technical strategy, product development, and operations, he's been able to make these a success. And he talks about how he does that and also how he fosters a good company culture as well. So there's a lot to learn from this interview. Definitely listen to what he has to say because he's one smart guy. So let's get started. Jason, thanks for coming on the podcast today.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and we also have Clay here as well, helping me to facilitate the conversation. And really, Jason, we'd just like to start off with understanding how you got into entrepreneurship and what it was that sparked your interest and really helped you launch into this journey.
Absolutely. So I worked while I was going to school at large companies. I started my career at groups like IBM, ATI Research. I was recruited out by a startup in Seattle in the early 2000s and fell in love immediately with the startup culture and the Northwest. That company did not work out, but myself and two other scientists left at the end and went on to form a group called Crypto Cybernetics, which we built up and ended up selling off. And ever since then, I just had I love being an entrepreneur. I love being able to do so many different things. After we had that sale, we went on to become an angel investor in the market. Through that, I ended up helping building and selling another company and just fell in love. It just reinforced every single time how much I love being on the front line to solve those problems and, work with really smart, passionate people that even during tough times, we're all there for one cause. And I spent some time in VC. And that's actually where I met my co-founder. He was through our wives at the time. We got dragged to some event at a bar, and we were the only two guys at this event. So we ended up sitting at the bar and, kind of hit it off over data and vodka and football. And, so we really got along well. We became personal friends. Dr. Lev Becker was finishing his postdoc at University of Washington in biochemistry. And one day I was talking to Lev about some of the companies we're investing in while I was on the VC side. And he kind of, mentioned how he really wished he could get his research in front of pharma. And the problem was he doesn't have the reputation. We had really cool science and had some really good findings that could really accelerate this. And that was the aha for he and I to go, well, what if we could socialize the science? What if in an objective way we could look at what is the science coming out of a lab and how that at a university and match that against the pipeline or needs of a pharma company in real time? And that was the aha spark that eventually led to what rMark is now.
That's awesome. And so it kind of cuts through some of the having to build the name for yourself. If you're doing really cool things in your research, you can now get connected basically through what you've built.
Yeah, that's the hope. Yep.
Awesome. And so what's been your biggest challenge then in getting started with rMark and getting this going? Like, where have you run into obstacles and had to overcome those?
Well, the first one is I don't come from this industry. So I am not a healthcare person. I've never been in life sciences or any of that. So when we decided I was early 2015. I was helping a friend of mine build his group up so he could sell it off. Went through some of that sale, trying to decide what I'd do next in my life. Lev and I had been bootstrapping this idea behind the scenes, kind of working on it a little bit. He had already moved to Chicago to take after he finished his postdoc to the University of Chicago. And we spoke to some friends of ours in the industry, and they said, yeah, this is actually a real problem, broader than just the research side we brought in the platform. So the first real challenge for me was, I sold my house, my car, packed up my dog in a U-Haul truck and drove to Chicago to launch it, and spent the first 6 months interviewing and meeting anyone in the pharma industry. So we knew we had the algorithms. We didn't know the product to put around it that you would actually want to touch every single day that would make a difference in the business and the operations of that business. So really understanding what were the real pain points. Everyone can say, yeah, I wish I was more connected to people. I wish I had better data intelligence, and I wish I could take better actions on them. Well, what does that really mean for the user to want to pick up that product and log in every day to our tool and use that as a decision? So that was the first real challenge for us, was understand what we actually needed to build. Once we had that, how do you get in front of pharma? These are very large, very complex organizations that you have to navigate. And as a small company, that was probably, and will continue to be, but definitely in the early days, was one of the hardest challenges.
I bet. I mean, Lilly's a big company in Indianapolis, and I've stopped asking people if they know someone that I know that works at Lilly, because it's just, they're like, no, not a chance.
Well, I guess, Jason, thank you for your time. One question that I had were, why do large pharma companies have trouble finding these research?
It's not that they have trouble finding the research. It's there's so much of it out there. How do they filter? So they can go pull all the data we can pull from all the public sites. We sign third-party agreements because they're buying the data from these other organizations. It's how do you take all these disparate data sets to paint the picture of what a researcher is doing, or what a physician who's running a clinical trial, or a physician with a patient population that needs that therapeutic. It's a broader view across that data, and then knowing what are the business objectives. One department may need it for this reason, where another department wants to use a physician for advocacy versus clinical trials versus R&D. Those are different objectives, and it gives you different views of the data. That's the real challenge, is how can they, by hand, pull all that data together? And the answer is it's very hard to do that. So they pay a lot of service providers to try to help them. Our tool is meant to break that down and say, well, we can look across all that data in real time, and our machine learning and our AI pieces can actually help you understand, based on business objective of team or department A versus team or department B in the same organization, what are the right people you should be engaging with, and why, and what should you engage on, and then how do we measure that? And that ability to look across the data and make those recommendations, I think, is the efficiency that is just hard to do by human hand.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious your experience kind of entering pharma, and everything that I'd heard about any government agency or any large corporation is just the relationships take a long time. Has that been your experience, or is there any kind of shortcut to expedite the process through large pharma?
I don't know if there's shortcuts. We've been fortunate, so we're part of Matter out of Chicago. It's a healthcare community and in that space, and their entire charter is to break down the barriers between these large healthcare companies, whether it's payers, providers, pharma companies, device companies, to the startups. So that really gave us a leg up, because those companies are trying to find startups to solve the problem, and they know you're a startup, so you don't have to be perfect. I don't know if that's a shortcut, but it definitely helped in the early days to be able to have very candid conversations with the leaders inside different organizations to say, this is where we're headed, what do you think? And get open feedback. That was a huge, I'd say, win for rMark, because we got a lot of feedback very quickly, and we're able to adjust and modify our product so that when we were ready to go to market more broadly, we at least had 80% of the pain points somewhat solved and accounted for, or could speak to why we didn't have the other ones.
Since your background has been in VC and companies as well, do you have any advice for companies maybe looking to enter into this sector that you can give them trying to raise money in the pharma industry?
Raise more than you think. So we all have this thing, and I know that's the whole VC is raise more. It's always going to be a rainy day. This is very different. These sales cycles are extremely long, and raise enough to understand how to pull yourself through, what's affectionately known as pilot hell. It's with any large B2B enterprise and pharma in particular, you can end up in reoccurring pilots. And while that looks good because you're making a little bit of money, you're not actually pulling them through to a license and really validating your business. And that sometimes takes a little bit more runway than you think it is. And those pilots are not as revenue generating. So the idea that you're going to have a 6-month pilot and then convert to a license, that is not always the case. And if you're counting on that in your revenue and you're not raising for that not to happen, that can really get you. And you'd be going back to the market without any real metrics other than, I have another pilot re-signed for another 6 months. And that makes your valuation and your argument you want to have for value really hard. So do it early, and it's worth the percentages early on to give up to make sure you have a business in a year from now.
Well, I mean, I really, really like what you do. I'm very curious. What is the future of rMark Bio? What does the future look for the next 3 years?
Yeah, so we really want to. We've been predominantly focused on pharma. We'll continue to. We really want to focus now on med devices and early biotech. But as we've been training new models and taking more data in, it's really helping make more strategic recommendations inside these organizations. Can we look broadly across what are the right go-to-market strategies for therapeutic in certain key markets, and can we make recommendations and then monitor that and get smarter about that? That's the area that we're really excited to grow in, is kind of taking our business intelligence up a few layers within the organization and more broadly throughout the entire organization to help them make better decisions across the board.
And it looks like Chicago is probably a great place to have this company.
It is. So, there was outside of Lev already being in Chicago, we had really a few key areas. You had Boston, the Jersey corridor, Chicago, and then San Diego. I didn't want to go to any of those without, you want the brain trust initial days, but it's also our customers are there. There's a lot of big pharma is right in Chicago. So it's a great place to kind of have people in your backyard that are rooting for you, and you make the right relationships and really pull those through. And then we can worry about expanding on to other markets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good to be close to your customers so you can have, especially while you're building, to have that feedback loop.
Absolutely.
For sure. So besides, having that density in Chicago, what's the general environment like for tech startups? Like, are there resources and, the talent? What is that ecosystem like, and how has that helped you to build rMark?
It's been growing. Chicago's awesome. When I first got there was a little apprehension because it was so a little nascent. And I say that coming from the outside, from Seattle, so I have a very skewed view of that world. But when I first got boots on the ground in Chicago, it reminded me of when I first got out to Seattle. It was early 2000. It wasn't like it is now by any stretch of the imagination. So we're starting to see that over the last 4 years. There's been so much growth and so much tech that, and investments are really coming into Chicago now. And there's been a few wins and a few small wins where that group's turning back around and reinvesting, which is what you want. Not only the capital, but that understanding, that leadership from people who have been through it, staying in the Chicago market. So we see a lot of growth potential. It's become a lot easier to recruit because, and mainly because some of the larger companies are coming back to Chicago because the quality of life and the cost of living is so much cheaper than the West Coast that you see Facebook, you see Google moving massive amounts of people there. Mm-hmm. That helps everyone in that community. And we're, groups like Matter, 1871, those were also huge wins to really prop up that community and help us grow faster.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So, do you have any questions there, Clay?
I think one other one, when you look at, I would say, investors as you guys to scale, what do you look for in investors on the VC? Because from what I can tell, you have a lot of interest on the VC, mm-hmm. so you can kind of pick and choose which ones are more aligned. So what do you look for in a VC?
Your word is perfect, alignment. So we have to be pretty careful that we don't get sucked in. We get sucked into a lot of healthcare VCs that we don't align with because healthcare is such a broad term. We have a very large market. We have 15, I think the last quote I actually saw was $19 billion market opportunity in our space that we play in, but it's somewhat niche. So you have to really understand it. So for us, it's really investors who can answer a question around, do you know how to scale a B2B enterprise SaaS business? Can you help us there? Great. Can you help do that in pharma or life science industry? Even better. And it's got to be one of those two, and it's really focusing on that healthcare life science. Do you understand the complexities of that world? It can be broader healthcare, we try to narrow that out filter that out pretty quickly, because we're also not a fit for them, and vice versa. So those are the things when we're looking for in the next round of VC is, have they done this before in the market that we're selling into, and therefore can they help us scale that?
Well, I guess for the listener that's trying to get more information on rMark Bio, where can you direct them to get more information?
Yeah,
on
check out rmarkbio.com, and there's forums there. You're always welcome, and we can connect with you and definitely update you more about what we're doing.
Awesome.
Jason, thank you so much for your time.
Great.
Yeah,
thank you.
for coming.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks again for listening to today's episode. If you have any thoughts or feedback on the conversation with Jason Smith, feel free to let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And as always, to be among the first to hear the stories about entrepreneurs, investors, and other tech leaders outside of Silicon Valley, subscribe to us on iTunes at powderkeg.com/iTunes. We'll catch you next time on Powderkeg Igniting Startups.